Hello, everyone. Welcome to Todd's. I don't know why I messed that up. It seems like an easy thing to say. Welcome to Todd Talks. I am joined by James Haeck. He's our lead writer at D&D Beyond, and today we're discussing Icewind Dale and all the wonderful monsters that are in it. It's pretty amazing. There's like 6 pages of just monsters in D&D Beyond. I wouldn't know how many pages there are in the book itself. I would have to take a look, but it is
Right.
oodles.
Well, there are over 70 new monsters in Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, which is basically a mini monster supplement of its own. So this adventure, its monsters alone are one of the things that are most modular about it. You can just kind of tear out as many monsters as you want, use them in your own game, use them in this campaign, get a lot of mileage out of them no matter what you do.
Yeah, that's another reason why I like this book so much is even if you didn't want to run the adventure, you get a lot of things that you would probably want to use anyways. Like I like the whole thing with secrets with, starting out as a player. But having that many monsters just readily available and of such an eclectic nature and so strange, it kind of makes it a must have. I can't think of another book that had that many monsters. I think it's like the highest number for any adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about that.
Yeah, Dungeon of the Mad Mage had a few I needed, like werebats. I need weregoblins desperately. But yeah, it's a high list, and that's what you want out of this.
Absolutely.
What are some of your personal favorites that came out of this book, though?
I have so many favorites because, and it's hard to choose because the selection is so vast, right? It's over 70 monsters ranging from normal creatures like Arctic foxes and going all the way up to the monstrous Chardelin dragon that appears in this adventure. There's a lot to choose from. But there's one in particular that I feel like no discussion of Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden can be without, and that is the Frost Maiden herself. There is this has been hyped up by people like Chris Perkins a lot in the lead up to the adventure, and it's something of a spoiler. So I want to let people give that spoiler warning early, because we will be delving into some things about the adventure that if you're a player, you might not want to have the surprise ruined for you.
Mm-hmm.
So Auril the Frostmaiden is a lesser deity. She is not a demon lord. She is not a mage of great power. She is a god, plain and simple. And the things that she is doing in Icewind Dale, the spell of eternal night that she casts every single night, has taken a lot of her divine essence to weave together, meaning that on the whole, if you look at her, she is maybe not quite as strong by the numbers as you think a god might be, but I want to dive into each one of her 3 divine forms and take a look at some of the cool things about her. The first one, her first form, Auril the Frostmaiden, is that of a humanoid snowy owl draped in an azure cloak with ram-like horns curling out of her forehead. And this is the first form you will see if you want to fight her for some fool reason.
And I mean, ever since they revealed the cover art, it's so primordial looking. Like it's just something, it kind of hits you in some instinctual way that this thing is a threat. No one wants to face a giant humanoid owl with ram horns. It's and it's pretty terrifying. It screams God.
It gives me that sensation of like looking at Egyptian gods or gods from the actual Norse mythologies, these sort of human animal hybrid creatures who don't necessarily look like towering titanic beings in the way that we think of, gods through modern fantasy. Like we think of Surtur from Thor Ragnarok, right? The 500-foot tall being of pure fire. But this creature, which is really no bigger than a human being, is rather humble in size and scope, but still exudes this sort of raw power when you look at it. And this is the form that you will see Oriole in when you first encounter her. It's the way that she chooses to appear to the world because of its intimidating nature, because of the power that it physically holds. And it has a number of powers. I've given you the spoiler warning, so I'm just going to delve into them right from the start. This creature is a CR9 creature, which, like I said, might not seem all that godlike when you look at it at first glance, but keep in mind, as soon as this being dies, so to speak, it will shed its original skin and emerge greater than ever before. And in the meantime, it's already dealing massive damage to you with its talons, with icy magic, with legendary actions galore and legendary resistances that will kind of keep your own magic at bay. Along with a number of just remarkable traits that I don't think any other CR9 monster has. Things like true sight out to 120 feet, allowing it to see through any one of your illusions or invisibilities or anything you might try to use to trick Oriole. You know, she is a god. These petty mortal magics will not fool her.
Right.
In addition to speaking all languages and having telepathy out to 1,000 feet, right? You look at a creature's language column, you expect to see common or draconic or something like that. No, you look at Oriole Step Luck and you see languages all. That's the sort of thing you see and you think, oh, okay, this is not a creature of normal caliber.
I find that to be more fun. I do like... I don't feel like gods need to be 20th level. I think what defines a god is more interesting. And this is why, like, the visage in this original form of Ariel is that it's just terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
It is iconic. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a good story reason as to why they are not as powerful as maybe they should be. But regardless, I just like the idea that there are low powered gods out there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I find that interesting.
And here's the thing. Well, no, I'll save this from we discuss Oriole's third form, because this is a fight that characters will be going into when they're, I would say, rather underleveled even for this creature, even for a CR9 creature.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll fight through Oriole, and if you're lucky and cunning and prepared to deal with her divine magic, you might pierce the divine heart of this owl-like creature, and its form will shed away, revealing Oriole's second form, I want to find a word to describe her as striking.
A giant ice maiden?
A giant, I mean, yeah, the Frost Maiden indeed.
Yeah.
There are a lot of words that are usually used to describe female divinities, and beautiful, striking, those are the usual ones, but and in some ways those describe her because she is immediately striking to behold, but the beauty is not exactly her main component here. She is a cold-hearted, cunning being that wants to preserve the world in ice and sort of keep it as her plaything. And this form reflects that. It's sharp, it's deadly, and yet it does possess this remarkable quality.
I also like that you are encountering 3 different versions of this villain, if you want to look at it that way, in the game, and every time it's like a leveling up boss battle in a lot of ways. It's like at the end of the game you're fighting something and it moves into the next phase.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're dealing with a whole new set of issues that you maybe were not having to deal with before, and that's why it's such an interesting fight. And I like this idea for future creatures as well. In D&D, I can see a lot of ways I would take low-level creatures and make them this way.
Yeah,
I could think of some like really gross things that like just pop out of something, right? Like maybe there's like some kind of infection inside of a creature, like zombie-like host, and then when you kill the zombie, it jumps out and tries to attack you.
Yeah.
So this is like a nice example of like you can really make creatures super weird. But I love this form.
We saw another sort of way of doing this in Mythic Odysseys of Theros. Mythic creatures
Hmm.
have sort of a form-like mechanic where once they're reduced to 0 hit points, suddenly something changes. They regain a ton of hit points and a handful of new powers. But this three-phase creature goes beyond even that, because she doesn't just gain new powers. Her entire being changes. No longer is she a human-sized, humanoid, snowy owl, ramhorn hybrid thing. She is a 10-foot tall woman of solid ice, so jagged and cruel, and her entire power set changes. She has the ability to uh, hold creatures in stasis, to create ice elementals from her body, to throw at you cold magic, the likes of which that no adventurer in Icewind Dale has seen yet. Um, and uh, that's before you even get to her legendary actions, which are
Right.
just as fearsome. And just like before, she has legendary resistances that will refresh every time you defeat a form. It's not like when you fight other legendary creatures like an adult dragon or something like that. We've got 3 legendary resistances, and once you've burned through them, they're done. You can't burn through all of her resistances so early. You have to do it form by form.
Yeah.
Um, and just as before, she possesses all these tremendous flavorful traits, all languages, telepathy. She will be taunting you throughout her, not just the fight, but throughout her entire lair as you wind your way towards her with,
And
yeah,
then she gets those layer actions on top of everything else, and
yes,
it's a hard thing to fight her in her lair,
yeah.
but by a long shot.
Yeah, not only the adventure tries to accommodate stuff like this, because fighting Auril herself is not necessarily a thing that you may uh, ever be capable of doing in this adventure. Icewind Dale may be stuck in its accursed state for a very long time, but there are other ways around it.
Hmm.
She can't rise into the air unless she has her snowy rock at her side, so you might instead launch a stealth mission to kill that bird so she can no longer cast her spell. You
Yeah.
might, using a scroll of Tarask summoning, if you're lucky enough to find it, just drop a Tarask on
Right.
her and deal with the fallout of that later.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, and speaking of dropping a Tarask on her, let's move on to her third form, uh, a strange, obtuse, geometric form that is called by some the Queen of Frozen Tears or the Winter's Womb. It is a 3-foot diameter diamond of ice that contains nothing less than Auril's divine spark itself. Um,
Yeah. This is interesting because now I just realized what this reminds me of. It kind of reminds me of It. You know, the creature in It. It had
mm,
so many forms, and then finally
mm,
you boil it down to then you know, big spoiler alert. You know, you have the spider-like form, and then you realize that's not even the form. It's actually these 3 deadlights.
yeah.
That is its final form, and this kind of harkens back to that same idea. I think.
Mm,
I feel like this is more terrifying because at first, you know, the owl is terrifying. The kind of owl form is scary. Then we get to the ice form, and that's more scary. And then this is pure primordial. This is something that has nothing human about it. It is, as you said, just pure divine energy, and you have to face this thing.
yes.
This makes me nervous. I mean, they all make me relatively nervous, but you know, when something has no body and is just a shard, then I'm like, okay, this is going to get bad,
Yeah,
right?
this is something that it kind of edges into eldritch horror territory. This is no longer a thing that is even vaguely humanoid. It's not something that
Yeah.
it's an intelligence beyond mortal ken. And I think a DM who really wants to lean into that can make this more than just a floating chunk of ice. Because you know, if you don't lean into that horrific alien aspect, then yes, perhaps this is just a chunk of ice. But it's all in the presentation.
Uh,
And like before,
yeah.
it's got all the tools you need to present it in that remarkable way.
Yeah, like creating again, this blizzard veil around itself, a blinding gleam off of it, a polar ray. Like it's just all it's this floating crystal that is just bringing snow and zapping you. And I imagine it just hovering in the most creepy way, almost robotic like, as it tries to accomplish its form, what its final ends. um I do love it.
It makes me think a little bit of those very, very old depictions of angels within Christian theology, where they're not beautiful human beings with wings and stuff like that, but they're these fiery rings of eyes that descend upon the earth and say, "Do not be afraid," because if you were a mortal being who looked upon it, you would be afraid. You would be very afraid. And I want to bring up one more thing, because when you reduce this form to 0 hit points, it is over. Auril is defeated, and more than that, Auril the Frostmaiden is dead. That is deicide on your character's hands. But but even a god is not so easily killed by mortal hands. The Forgotten Realms have seen many gods die and be reborn over the years, and it's written in the book that there is a way for Auril to be revived and be returned through the worship of her faithful. And I feel that is a secret I will keep for the people who want to pop open the book and read it themselves. There are a lot of ways to spin this adventure, and this is one very interesting way to kind of bring it back.
Well, and again, nothing is scary unless there's a chance it always can come back. You're not like 100% certain that it is gone to me.
Yeah.
And again, to mention that despite them finally defeating that thing, there is a later Stephen King book that references that there are murders in Derry again, indicating that the creature has actually come back yet one more time, and that those little hints of like, well, did you really win? I mean, there's such a huge aspect to horror. When you think you've killed all the vampires, but there's just a single pair of glowing eyes in the night still left. Are you ever truly going to be safe, or have you just passed this on to the next generation of adventurers who are going to try to defeat this creature?
I think that's a very worthwhile story concern, and it depends on the type of story you're talking about. I think that fits really well for this story, of sort of evil returning seasonally, that sort of thing, just like the winter itself. It happened in Curse of Strahd as well, right? There's an option for, even if you defeat Strahd, it may not be forever, he may return. And in that story, I'm not as big a fan of it. It's such a sort of gothic melodrama that I would love to see, evil is defeated once and for all, and good reigns in that domain of Ravenloft, at least.
Well, it's a tough one when you look at those creatures of like Dracula and stuff like that, because it became almost a trope in Hammer horror.
For Dracula to keep coming back.
Yeah, because they had to keep on making Dracula movies,
right?
And it's also a trap of popularity. We, even with Sherlock Holmes, or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle hated that character eventually, got so tired of writing him, but the public demand was so ridiculous that he had to write Sherlock Holmes back into existence again. And he did so, and they went on to go on for a long time. And I think that it is essential horror, and vampires. Films so often vampires are not officially dead.
Well, that's actually a really interesting way of looking at it. We've gotten far off topic from Icewind Dale, but that's okay. But the idea of belief in a character, sort of in a meta way, that people loved Sherlock Holmes, so Sir Arthur Conan Doyle brought Holmes back. Applying that in a fantasy setting, the people of Barovia are still so terrified of Strahd that their belief of him wills him back into existence. That's very The Witcher, and actually that's very Theros. If you've read Mythic Odysseys of Theros, the gods in that setting are
Yes. Oh
really
yeah.
just sort of amalgamations of public belief that have been willed into grand power. But that's one of my favorite parts of that setting, and kind of marrying that idea to Ravenloft or Icewind Dale in the case of Orioles Return. Uh, that's delightful to me. Oh,
What
that's very cool.
it's a horrible trap in your mind of I had a lot of like these night terrors as a kid, and these, you know,
Mm,
when I was scared of monsters, I was worried that if I thought about the monster, it would become real.
mm.
Like somehow if you think about this thing, it gets summoned. And I think this was actually like, weirdly enough, Poltergeist 2 brought this up. Like if you think about him, he'll find you. That idea is terrifying. The idea that there's a monster, this creature that you have to actively not think about them or else they see you
Mm,
is scary, right? And, you know, that notion of if I see you, if you see them, they see you. It's a nice line in Constantine.
mm.
As well as like if you're aware of this thing, then on some level you believe in that thing, which is again very you know,
Mhm.
this idea that the gods are the most terrifying monsters of all, you know, or people like Strahd, because yeah, I do like the idea if too many people believe that Strahd's alive, does he just coalesce out of the
Yeah,
mists again? And the
yeah.
mists very much like to punish, and they don't like punishment to stop.
Mhm.
And that's an essential thing about Ravenloft is that cyclical nature. Like if the Feywild is pure chaos, Ravenloft is repetition.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that that comes to something in the yearly Ravenloft one shots that I publish on D&D Beyond. And there's another one coming this Halloween as well, where it's not just Strahd must die. That's the name
yeah,
of the first one, but the name of the second one is Strahd must die again.
yeah.
And because he must die again, he must die over and over again, because that is the story we want to tell ourselves of this evil coming and then being destroyed.
It's also very yeah. It's so gothic and depressing too to just think you won, and
Yeah.
then you're 80, and then maybe you see your children suddenly have to deal with the same threat all over again.
Oh, that's
Um,
too real, Todd.
well, yeah,
Oh no.
but this is why that is such a powerful thing in horror. I think is because
Yeah.
that's everyone's fear, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be a regime or whatever, or a
Yeah.
political ideal. There is that scare, that fear in all of us that we will forget history.
Hmm.
And I think in the cases like Strahd and in the case of you know, Icewind Dale, this is also a very real fear.